Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. Today's video is going to be a little bit of something different. We're going to have a bit of a chat about all things playing string instruments in worship bands. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about is definitely related to other sort of orchestral like melody instruments, but we are going to be specifically talking about strings just because that's my area of expertise. But if you have any questions related not to strings, please whack them in the comments box. Any questions related to anything that we're going to talk about in today's video, again, put them down below because I'm going to be monitoring this video. Jon is also going to be monitoring this video and we will get back to you ASAP. I'm really, really excited about this. This is an area that I am very passionate about because, I've been playing worship bands since I was a teenager. But when I first started getting involved with the more kind of electrically powered worship bands, shall we say, I was told initially that a viola wouldn't work. And I like to think that's been proved wrong by now, but just in case it hasn't been, we're here today. And I just think that this is an experience that a lot of string players go through, a lot of classical musicians go through, because, we can sight read a symphony. That's our skill set. But if you're asked to stand up on stage, basically, improvising with nothing in front of you, that's scary. And it's new to a lot of people doing it. It's not about us at the end of the day anyway, but sometimes that doesn't always make us feel any less nervous. And hi, Jon, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, no worries.
Could you just give us like a brief introduction of yourself, like what you do, and yeah.
So I'm the worship pastor here at Birmingham Vineyard, and been doing that for nearly 7 years, just over 7 years, and been enjoying that for a long time, been learning lots, and it's a great opportunity to serve here. I'm also involved with DTI Worship, Dreaming the Impossible, which is a national youth festival, and I oversee the worship for that as well, and Heather plays at that, which is fun. I'm also a site pastor here, and I'm married, and I've got a little one just over 6 months old. So it's lots to keep me busy, but I'm having a great time.
Oh, amazing.
Thanks for having me.
I was going to say, I always enjoy chatting to friends and getting them to introduce themselves because you're always just like, oh, wow, you do that as well. Nice. So obviously I can chat, until the cows come home about, what I would suggest to string players, but I'd love to hear the whole point of this chat. And thank you so much. Is to really just get the worship leader's perspective on it, because like we've sort of worked together, for want of a better word, in worship bands and all those things, and you've worked with string players. So I would just love to get your take on what it's like having a string player in your worship band, and also like what are you wanting from them? Like why have you invited them to be a part of that?
It's always an absolute joy when there's a strings player joining us in a worship team. I think it really adds something extra. We can only go so far with the instruments that we've got, and so when we have a strings player, it's just a wonderful addition to that environment. It's unfortunately it's a bit of a rare occasion, but I'd love to see that change. I think oftentimes, when having another melody instrument in there just really helps to draw out the best of kind of what's happening in the moment, and to more fully worship God in a musical way as well as a kind of in a sung way. And so I'm really passionate about seeing new strings players come along. I think there's obviously challenges that come with that in terms of a lot of strings players, like yourself, are classically trained and often might be unsure of what to play. And so that, and obviously for a humble worship leader, it can be a bit of a challenge to try and think, do I have to suddenly go up and write, sheet music for my strings player to play? And it can be a really difficult place to start. And there's also that thing of like, I'm not a strings player, but the strings player doesn't just want to do their own thing. They want some advice as well. So how do I, as a worship leader, think like a strings player, but also I'm not currently in possession of that knowledge. So there's a lot of tensions that come with it, but I think it can be a really a beautiful thing when it happens, and something that we should really work hard to accommodate.
Yeah, absolutely. And something you've touched on there, like what can the string player themselves be doing to kind of prepare a little bit, I guess, before they come, so that, because like you say, most worship leaders are not classical string players. How can they come to that first rehearsal or to worship and just feeling prepared so that they can just kind of relax and play?
Mm. I think probably the first thing is to watch what other people do. So where you see, like, try and seek out strings players who are involved in worship and just watch them. I saw a little video on Instagram the other day of a little kid sitting on the front row of church with his electric guitar, and somebody had told him that they learnt electric guitar by coming to church early and watching the electric guitarist at church. And so there was this little kid on the front row with his electric guitar, not actually playing anything, but just watching. And I think that's that's a really powerful image. That's how I learned how to play. That's how I learned how to be involved. Is to, you know, watching people, listening to recordings. You can listen to like stems or like multi-tracks of actual releases and listen to what they're doing in those recordings, and just try and like immerse yourself in that world, just like you would if there was a, you know, if you suddenly had to learn how to go and play like folk music, you go and watch other folk music players and see what they do. So that'd probably might be my first thing. Secondly, we often operate off chord sheets as bands, and so I mean, if nothing else, just kind of familiarize yourself with that. Work out what the little letters above the words mean. Hint, they're the chords that we're playing. You know, work out what key we're in, and if you can do that when you look at a sheet and just say, yeah, we're in this key and these are the chords, and then you know your major scale in that key, then it makes it a lot easier. And you can, if nothing else, just play the root notes for a little while until you get more comfortable, and because you can then add in passing notes, and then you can add in runs and so on and so on and so on. And then I think just the last thing, in our context, in addition to that, we use something called Nashville numbers, and that is where we effectively replace a chord with a number, which corresponds to the number of that note is in the scale. For example, if you're in the key of G, G is the one note, C is the fourth note in the G scale, so therefore C is 4, D is 5, and so on. And we do that because it's much easier to transpose in that, because if you transpose to a different key, your one chord is still your one chord, you've just changed the key. So we do that a lot, and so it's helpful if you can familiarize yourself with that, so that when people are kind of throwing numbers out everywhere, it doesn't sound like you're in a maths class. It sounds like you actually know what's happening. So yeah, that's that'd be my advice, I guess, of some places to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the numbers thing was the thing that threw me the most. I don't think it had been really explained to me, and I hadn't asked. And literally, I think they said, you know, oh, it's a chord 4 there, or oh, it's no, they didn't even say that. They just said,
Yeah.
oh, it's a 4, and I was like, what? Like, I had no idea what was going on. So yeah, I definitely second that a lot. I want to bring it back to not having the dots in front of you, because obviously, you know,
Yeah.
that's how we're trained. We're used to having a lot of information in front of us, and then all of a sudden we have none at all. And obviously that can be a really, really daunting thing, because, you know, it's effectively improvisation. Again, this isn't something that we do a huge amount. And just kind of, do you have any sort of encouragements? Or, I mean, obviously you've spoken about using the chord sheets. Again, I absolutely second that. That's exactly how I started, was literally just playing root notes for the entire song. Yeah, what would you have to say to people that are feeling really nervous about not having any dots in front of them?
That's a good question. I think relax in some way, which is easier said than done. But I think an encouragement and a challenge is that worship music is probably different to any other type of music, any other genre. You know, where if you're playing in a string quartet or if you're playing in an orchestra, people will come to watch you play. They're there to watch you play. Whereas in worship, no one comes to church to watch you play. As heartbreaking as that might be for some of you, that's not a good enough reason for people to come to church. That's not why people come. And so that can both be an encouragement in that people aren't expecting perfection, but also it can be a challenge in minimizing what you're playing, to a point where you realize that you're not the main event, and actually your job is to serve the song. And so whereas in a classical piece, serving the song is playing exactly what the dots say, exactly how the composer intended it to the best of your ability. In worship music, that serving the song might look like not playing for some of it. It might look like playing something very simple. It might look like playing something more complex in a particular moment. But generally, I'd say simple is better. And this is probably something that we come up against with guitarists and drummers and bass players and keys. Simplicity rules the day with worship music, because worship is about accommodating everybody, helping everybody to be involved. And so kind of lowering the bar initially to help people get involved so people don't like check out. But then equally, in a very smart way, using some of the same techniques that you use in classical music, you can then develop the worship music by keeping it simple but adding in some extra bits that sound simple but are actually maybe quite technically challenging. Ultimately, you're not playing a different instrument, so all the same techniques and tools that you use in a classical place or a folk place or a string quartet place are going to be exactly the same tools as you'd and techniques that you'd use in worship. You're just employing them differently. So I guess it's an encouragement in that no one's expecting perfection, and so just crack on, do your best. People will be glad that you're there. But then also, just be challenged in some way that you're not the main event, and so to kind of fade into the background a little bit is a positive thing in worship music. So yeah, they're my thoughts about getting involved. But do it, just do it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is really, really encouraging. Thank you. And I think what you said there about it's not a performance, and obviously that's something that we sort of worship bands will battle against till the end of time, I think, is the fact that this is not a performance. We're here to facilitate. And I think coming to that from as a performer is a different angle, and can be a very liberating one, which I think it's very easy to focus on the things that are really scary about the whole new experience, but actually a lot of it it's a lot easier in some respects. And like you say, when it comes to a technical standpoint, no one's asking you to play spiccato, it's all good. But I mean, one of the questions that I get asked the most is what equipment do I need to bring with me? Do I need to bring my own, do I need to bring my own microphone? Do I need to bring my own cables? Like, are we going to have in-ears? If you could explain a tiny bit about what in-ears are, that'd be amazing. All that kind of thing. What do they need to bring with them, or do they just need to bring their instrument?
Depending on what kind of situation you're playing in, if you're playing in a small group or whatever, obviously you don't need to do any of that. And in some ways, I'd suggest that might be the best place to start for you anyway, playing in smaller environments, getting used to it. But as you get into sort of bigger environments and places that are going to need amplification, I'd always say that it's worth coming prepared. It's always worth coming prepared in whatever we do in life and in whatever way we can. And so I think if you have a microphone or you have the ability, like a pickup, to plug your instrument in, I think that can be a really positive thing, because then if you turn up to a venue and the sound guy doesn't have a clue and they weren't prepared for it and they don't have anything that will suit that, you can say, oh, actually, I've got one with me, I know how that works, and can be able to crack on with that. If you don't have the means or the ability to be able to do that, what I would say is watch some YouTube videos about like how to mic up your instrument, whether it be violin or viola or cello or any other melody instrument, because you can. Because then if someone like a sound guy just hands you a mic and a cable, you go, oh, crikey, I don't know what to do with that. But if you've done some pre-research, you can think, oh, I know exactly the best place to mic my instrument to make it sound the best. Because you're then serving the band, you're serving the sound guy, and in some ways you're serving yourself, helping yourself to sound good. So I don't think you need a mic. Don't let that be a barrier. But equally, if you have the means to be able to do that, then great. And also then how to use it is also really important. Heather, you mentioned about in-ears. So we use in-ear monitors. So in the olden days, I was going to say, we had fold-back monitors, so big speakers that sat on the floor that then. You could mix particular sounds through so that you could hear yourself. That was a pain for lots of reasons. I'm glad that we're not back there anymore. And we have these in-ear monitors where we can choose what we hear in our own in-ears. We can choose what we hear, and it helps us to hear ourselves when we're performing. That being said, it can be a really different experience for everybody, actually, drummers and vocalists, but particularly strings players, as you're so used to hearing your instrument so close to you. And so I think it is an adjustment. It's helpful if you are playing in an environment with in-ears that you can invest in a decent set, sort of £100, you can get a really good set that are kind of industry standards, and that will help you out because you'll be able to hear things clearly. It'll also help the other people out because you won't be complaining about not being able to hear yourself. But it is definitely a learning curve. And so I'd seek out some wisdom, ask some people who you know can do that stuff well. Say, hey, how do you get a good mix for your in-ears? I've been struggling with working out what I need to hear. Maybe ask some other strings players as well. Some people play with one earphone out and one earphone in. That's not best because it can damage your ears if you do that, because it can kind of do weird things with pressures and so on. So it's best if you can play with both in, but obviously it's a different skill and something that takes a lot of time to get used to for everybody. So and it might even be worth just trying it. Try it at home. Like listen to some music with your while playing, and just kind of get used to what that feels like. So yeah, I think the key thing is don't let any of this be a barrier. Get involved, absolutely get involved. And then as you grow and do it more, you can invest in it, just like we'd invest in anything else that's important to us. As we go along, invest in it, both monetarily and your time and energy as well. So yeah, that'd be some headlines.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And I wanted to ask that because I think that was one of the biggest, barriers for me, was that I was like, I don't know how to do anything tech, like just because I've never had to. So yeah, I definitely double down on the point of just like doing a bit of research beforehand, because I have been there when a sound guy's been like, here you go. And I was like, someone help me. I don't know what to do.
Just the other thing I'd add, Heather, is if you can bring some form of tuner, whether it's a tuner on your smartphone, you can get an app or like a clip-on thing, because if playing in an orchestra, you have the tuning note at the start of the performance. That's not going to happen in worship music, and because you're by yourself as well, it's really important that you're in tune, because it's not going to merge in with a bunch of other strings players. So try and invest. You can get like little clip-on tuners which clip onto the top of your instrument, or just like a smartphone app that you can just tune in, because also oftentimes you'll be playing in places where temperatures change rapidly and tuning can be thrown out. So it's helpful if you can have that with you as well. Sorry to jump in.
No, not at all. That was an excellent point. And I was just about to say as well, in terms of like, in-ears and, in-ears aside, what you as a string player want to listen to, the keys player, if there is one, there isn't always, it doesn't matter. But if there is one, the keys player can be a really, really helpful tool, and is a very it's more of a familiar texture as a string player to kind of bed in with and listen to and get the tuning right. So thank you for bringing that up, because yes, that was going to be one of my things, is make sure you tune, because also, a lot of guitars and things have tuners built in, and guitarists will do that, just as they're warming up or whatever. And yeah, I've definitely been caught out by that one a couple of times. So, is there anything else that you want to add?
I think just the only thing to say is I think it's really valuable having a strings player there can take our music from just a band setup, and that can only go so far, and just our English words, which can only go so far. But when you throw in violin, it gives us a musical expression where we can praise God with everything that He deserves, and we can just glorify Him with music, which is. And we're adding texture, we're adding variety when we add a strings player. And so I love it when strings players are involved in worship. I love seeing strings players involved in worship. I love them being in my bands, and I'd absolutely encourage them, to whoever might be listening, to get involved and try it. Keep practicing, keep doing it, keep practicing behind closed doors, keep trying to pursue opportunities. I always say, never say no to an opportunity, because you're just going to learn from it. So as much as you can, get involved, and be encouraged. Try it out. Worship God with the gifts that He's given you.
Amazing. And on that note, thank you very much, Jon.
Thanks, Heather.